say good evening, Minister Anand, and good evening to all of our audience has joined us on Zoom, as well as the audience on Facebook. Welcome to another edition, our first edition of Leaders Talks. And today we have with us Minister Anita Anand. If there was a poll taken of one of the hottest seats, the hottest jobs that somebody has in Canada today, I think, Minister Anand, you will be in one of those top five for sure. So, we really appreciate you making the time to come to the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce. And my name is BJ Thomas. I am the president, and it is my honor and privilege to welcome you to our event today. What would we be talking about today? And I think the timing couldn't have been better. Yesterday, somebody asked me, did the government make that announcement knowing that Anita ji is going to be coming to our event? And in full disclosure, we had this already planned, so this had nothing to do with you coming here. But when the person asked me in full jest, I said yes. Because of us is why this happened. This was entirely in jest, so we're not taking credit for it, but in jest, we definitely will say that. So today's program, we're going to be talking about how things, and because, obviously with the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, we definitely, are very pleased with the fact that, the Indo-Canada relationship is coming to bear here, and it is helping us out in this times. We're also want to know about you, how the fight has been with, how have you been fighting this fight? We see you right there on the battleground, offloading the COVID-19 vaccines on the screen out there. And, as an Indo-Canadian woman leader, you make all of us proud. And we definitely, see the work that's been done. And obviously there are questions. As I said, this is a hot seat. It's one of those situations where it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. So given that background, I think we really want to hear from you. And, you will also tell us about how all of us can get vaccinated and how the rollout is going. So moving on, we have a little disclaimer because we're a nonprofit. All the information provided today at webinars is for information purposes, does not constitute legal or professional advice, bunch of stuff there. And the views expressed by speakers are their own personal opinion, do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the ICCC. And Anita ji, as a past lawyer, or you're still a lawyer, you probably know all of that in there. So I will now come to Anita Anand and the Minister for Public Service and Procurement. I think you got into this job in November, and little probably did you know when you got in what was in store. And I think today we're all wanting to hear from you of how things panned out. But a little bit of an introduction about Anita Anand and Minister Anand and to the Indo-Canadian diaspora, the Indo-Canadians on Facebook and on Zoom. Minister Anita Indira Anand is the Minister for Public Service and Procurement and also the Receiver General for Canada. She represents the riding of Oakville in the House of Commons since the 2019 federal election, sitting as a member of the Liberal Party. She was born in Kentville, Nova Scotia. Her parents were both physicians, and this is the part, Anita ji, maybe too much information, but it's a little bit of trivia that I think our audience might still like to know of. We're proud of every Indo-Canadian out there. Her father was from Tamil Nadu, her mother was from Punjab. For those of you so she brings across the whole country together there. She holds 4 degrees. So a Bachelor of Arts in Political Studies from Queen's University, a Bachelor of Arts in Jurisprudence from Wadham College, Oxford, a Bachelor of Laws from Dalhousie, and a Master of Laws from the University of Toronto. She's held academic positions at Yale, Queen's University, and Western University. And before election, she was a law professor at the University of Toronto. I think that's a very, very long resume, a lot of accomplishments even before you took this post. with that, I'd like to hand it over to you, Anita ji and Minister Anand. If we can hear a little bit from you in terms of how the fight's been going, and any message that you might have for the Indo-Canadian community, Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, our members, and the community at large, and Canada at large. And those of you who are on the in the audience, please send us your questions either in Zoom through the Q&A section or under the comments in Facebook. And we will try to get as many of them answered by Minister Anand. So over to you, Minister Anand. We're all looking forward to hearing from you.
Dhanyavad and namaskar. So lovely to be here with you, G. And I'm very, very appreciative of the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce for your important work during these difficult times. I'm speaking to you today from the territory of many First Nations, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And I am also speaking to you today as the first Hindu cabinet minister in the federal cabinet. And in that regard, it has been an honor to serve our community and the broader Canadian community, not just during COVID-19, but throughout the time of this government. I want to acknowledge the work of the ICCC in building on a long history of business and trade with one of Canada's most valued global partners. You have been advocates for Indo-Canadians and our economic success for 43 years. While your events have been a little different during this pandemic, I know that ICCC has been integral in providing support and information to small businesses and communities that have faced immense challenges during COVID-19. I want to tell you a little bit about procurement during COVID-19. That has been a monumental effort that we have been engaged in as the Government of Canada. To begin, we have procured more than 2.5 billion individual pieces of personal protective equipment. Whether we're talking about gloves, gowns, masks, N95s, hand sanitizer, you name it, we are procuring it. And we have already had tens of millions of these supplies delivered to date. In addition, we have procured 40 million rapid tests for the entire country. And we have given out to the provinces over 19 million of these rapid tests to support contact tracing and testing. We also provided over $4 billion in the Safe Restart Agreement to the provinces and territories. So the bottom line with regards to PPE and rapid tests alone is that we are supporting the provinces and territories through a very collaborative effort to make sure they can combat COVID-19. Now moving on to vaccines. We know that the fastest way out of this pandemic is by getting vaccines into the arms of Canadians as quickly as possible. That is why we signed a large number of agreements in the summer and fall of last year. In particular, we signed 7 agreements with leading vaccine manufacturers on the advice of the Vaccine Task Force for up to 400 million doses, the largest number of doses per capita of any country in the world. Our procurements were motivated and generated by the advice of the Vaccine Task Force and the Public Health Agency of Canada. We were one of the first countries in the world to have Moderna and Pfizer on Canadian soil. We were one of the first countries in the world to approve and begin inoculations of these vaccines, and one of the first countries in the world to have vaccines taking hold in each jurisdictions within our country. Vaccines are now arriving, more on the way. Now, we know that there have been some bumps over the past month in terms of our vaccine supply chain. The reason for these bumps have been because vaccine manufacturers are drastically ramping up production in order to fill orders around the world. So whether we're talking about Pfizer in terms of its plant in Belgium or Moderna in terms of its plant in Switzerland, the reality is that there have been moves by these vaccine suppliers to move to peak production. And as a result, vaccine deliveries slowed over the past couple of weeks. But we are returning now to a more regular delivery of vaccines into this country. Those delays were temporary. And starting this week, we had 79,000 Pfizer vaccines delivered into this country. And next week, we will move to quadruple the number of vaccines, with over 400,000 Pfizer vaccines arriving through the end of February and into March, with Moderna also, so that by the end of Q1, we will have 6 million vaccines of 2 approved candidates in this country. By the end of Q2, 20 million vaccines of approved candidates. And by the end of Q3, any Canadian who wishes to have access to a vaccine will have access, given our diverse portfolio of vaccines. So that is the message for today. We are very much on track, despite the bumps in the road that we expected in a very tight race for vaccines that all countries are experiencing. And my officials and I every day are working with suppliers to accelerate deliveries as quickly as we can. In addition, we have joined the Kovacs initiative, and as a result, Canada will receive approximately 1.9 million AstraZeneca doses of its vaccine, contingent on Health Canada approval prior to the end of Q2. And deliveries of this vaccine could begin in Q1 prior to the end of March. This is in addition to the 20 million doses of AstraZeneca that we have procured. We have other vaccine candidates in rolling review at Health Canada. That's Johnson & Johnson and Novavax as well. And then Sanofi, GSK, and Medicago, also in our portfolio, are in clinical trials. So that's an example of our diversified portfolio of vaccines. 2 approved candidates, 3 in regulatory approval, and 2 in clinical trials. That is diversification. That's been our strategy since the very beginning, last August, when we signed these agreements. We want to get doses into this country as quickly as possible. We need to remember we're in the middle of a massive undertaking. We will see more significant and more stable deliveries of this supply chain coming into the country. And I want to know and tell you that we are appreciative of your innovation and your thought as you manage through the pandemic as the ICCC and all of your members. I look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon, hopefully this year. And I wanted to thank you for inviting me here today to give you remarks and to respond to your questions that you might have about our vaccine supply chain, our PPE supply chains, or me personally. If you have any questions about my family or my upbringing or my beliefs, I'm actually sitting here with the Bhagavad Gita beside me. So very happy to talk to you about anything you'd like. Thank you. Merci.
So thank you very much, Minister Anand. And I think we've got a bunch of questions. We had questions coming into us, even before, as we had put this out on Facebook and on social media. So we've got a bunch of questions. One question, I think, right off the bat is I am an engineer, and you sometimes you add a factor of safety to a design where you say, this is, I need to a two inches of a bar, metal bar would do, but I would just do 4 inches just in case, right? So in this particular case, we're only 34 million people, and we've gone in and we've gotten a supply chain, or we've actually put in orders for 390 million, and then Novavax, and now the supply from India. So we're looking at really, we were already the highest per capita. Now we're going to be even more. Now, is that did we on hindsight, did we over, and I did, you didn't mention that, but on hindsight, could we have done this differently, or what are your thoughts? Ms. Anand, I think you're on mute.
We are seeing the strategy of diversification playing out in real time, and it is proving to be an effective strategy. What we thought at the very beginning of this pandemic is that we didn't want to put all of our eggs in one basket. We didn't know, the vaccine suppliers didn't know last August which vaccines would be effective, which vaccines would be approved and produced at high rates. We were fortunate that we adopted a diversified procurement approach because the first two vaccines that came online and were approved were 95% accurate and effective in terms of their own clinical trial results. And Canada had purchased those, whereas other countries, including the UK, had not invested in companies like Moderna at the time. So we diversified our procurements and we made sure that we had access to the vaccines as they became approved and effective. And that's what we've seen with Moderna and Pfizer. And indeed, we will see that with other vaccines as they become approved. We will be able to have multiple vaccines in Canada's portfolio for provinces and territories. And that is going to be even more advantageous because what we see with Pfizer and Moderna is that they need to be frozen. So we purchased 440 deep freezes to store those vaccines. AstraZeneca and J&J do not require that level of refrigeration. So we will have more flexibility with additional vaccines if they are approved for use. And if there are no other vaccines, we have enough of Pfizer and Moderna alone to vaccinate the entire Canadian population. And I will say that we have made a commitment to share doses with the developing world. So any extra doses that we have, we will share with other countries that cannot afford these vaccines or that are struggling to ensure they have access to supply chains for vaccines. And that's our strategy. Diversify, diversify, diversify. So we have early access and rapid access to vaccines. And over the next weeks in the month of February and March, we are going to see a very steep incline in vaccines coming into this country and being then administered to the Canadian population.
So again, we are the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and as a bunch of business people here, if you have extra inventory of vaccines, the question is, would we be giving this away for free? Would we be charging for it? And not to take this out of context, would we be making a profit on it? The third one is not to be answered, but I am just saying that that's a thought, and that's why it is done by the government. If it was in private hands, that could probably have been something that we could raise about. But would we be actually selling these or actually giving them away? Because we're going to have a huge lot of vaccines, any which way that we look at it.
I'm actually really glad that you asked the question, because what it shows me is that you understand our portfolio. You understand that with 7 agreements, we will have up to 398 million doses coming into this country, if not more, and that we will have enough vaccines for all Canadians. And that's a really, really important point. So thank you for making it, and thank you for understanding the diversification approach that we have adopted as a federal government. Now, in answer to your question, of course, my portfolio is procurement. I'm in charge of buying the vaccines. We have other ministers, Karina Gould, the Minister of International Development, for example, Marc Garneau, our Foreign Affairs Minister, and we work as a team. So we will take the information we have about our incoming supply and how many doses we have that are in excess, and we will make sure that we are sharing doses with the rest of the world. The idea is to help the developing world, not to make a profit on the developing world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Minister Anand. There's also, I think you've mentioned this in the past. I was listening to another interview of yours where you mentioned that, we're part of Kovacs, where, the world is a safer place if everybody in the world gets vaccinated. However, in Canada, there could be a situation where people might decide not to get vaccinated. So how would we approach something like that? And I'm sure in the cabinet that's been discussed. What are your thoughts on that? How do you think? What if a bunch of Canadians decide not to get vaccinated? Would there not be a threat? And how do we go about doing that?
Okay, well, thank you for the question. Glad you mentioned Kovacs. If I could just mention something about Canada's contribution to Kovacs before responding to your question about
Mhm.
vaccine
Absolutely.
hesitancy, I would really appreciate it. So what we did with Kovacs is, as a country, we wanted to support this multilateral alliance. So we gave $220 million to the advanced market commitment for low-income countries. And then we gave another $220 million to the facility for self-financing countries. So the low-income countries are going to have donations of vaccines through Canada's $220 million commitment. We are one of the highest contributors to the Kovacs facility. In addition, we joined the Facility for Self-Financing Countries, which allows us access to 15 million doses. And we have elected to pursue AstraZeneca doses in that commitment for developing countries. And I will say that the reason we gave so much money to this facility is because we needed to ensure that there was doses going to the developing world, that we were sharing with the developing world. And so the media reports on Canada's contributions to Kovacs haven't fully understood this nuance, that we have given a separate $220 million to Kovacs for developing countries. Furthermore, our Minister of International Development, Karina Gould, plays a leadership role in the Kovacs facility, and we are very committed to sharing with the developing world. Now, on to your question. I want to say something about South Asians in particular, especially because I know this community well, and I have many friends and relatives, including in the ICCC, who care about how South Asians are faring through COVID and what are the responses of South Asians in COVID. What we have seen from the research is that South Asians in the Peel region have a higher COVID infection rate and a higher mortality rate. And this is the case for South Asians in Canada and the UK. And that's a very important point to remember, that in the South Asian community, the necessity for preventative measures like wearing masks and social distancing, as well as vaccines, are very, very important. Why is it that South Asians have a higher COVID infection rate? One of the reasons is, in my view, that many of you are essential workers. You are on the front lines. You are in hospitals. You are in long-term care homes. You are in cargo-related transportation, such as trucks. You are making sure our communities function. And that may be one reason. Another reason is one that is near and dear to my heart, is that we live in multi-generational households. We very much love living with our parents. I am always wishing my father would come to live with me, although he refuses. I wish to be with my parents, and I wish for my children to be with me at all times. And I think that's a characteristic of South Asian families. But what we need as a result is we need community advocacy groups to help the community to understand the importance of the science, the importance of public health measures, and the importance of vaccines. We also need to fund research into the effects of COVID on South Asians. And so I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Anand. We have a question. Obviously, this is the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, although the announcement just happened yesterday. Would you know? There is. I don't know if there was details. There's 2 vaccines in India. Everybody knows where it's manufactured. Do you know which kind is going to come to Canada? Do you know does it need to have government approval, Health Canada approval, or I'm assuming the answer is yes, but would you want to, do you have any details? If not, I know it just happened yesterday, but if you have any details, we'd love to know. Minister Anand, you're on mute again.
Sorry, thank you. One of the things I will say is that since the beginning of this pandemic, our government has been in touch with not only vaccine manufacturers, but suppliers around the world for access to COVID-19 vaccines. And that included India and other jurisdictions, because we recognize the manufacturing output of these jurisdictions, including India. So I've had close contact with a number of manufacturers of COVID-19 vaccines. The conversation with the Prime Minister was very positive, and we're really looking forward to further collaboration in this area. And I will say that we will continue to support and discuss our commitment to diversity of vaccines in our portfolio. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Minister Anand. Another thing I think that a lot of us want to know is, I think we've got the first responders, the healthcare workers, they're number one, they're first in line. I don't think there's enough, that we know of who's next in line. And people are like, when does my turn come in? So I don't know if it's been explicitly called out in any shape or form, but people in the audience, I see a lot of questions. When do I get my vaccine? And I know that you said Q3, we got 20 million, but even that 20 million is still short of the 34 that of Canadians. So, or is that in there?
I didn't say that. My numbers are as follows: 6 million by the end of Q1, 20 million in addition to that by the end of Q2, 70 million by the end of Q3.
Okay, so that covers Canadians by
exactly.
End of Q3.
All Canadians will have access to a vaccine prior to the end of September, if not before. So we are continuing to work with our vaccine manufacturers to accelerate doses into this country.
Okay, and I think the corollary to that is there some kind of a method in where, who gets it next after the first responders and the healthcare workers?
Okay, so the NACI, it's a national committee that comes up with the guidelines for inoculations, decided or recommended that vulnerable peoples should have the first access to vaccines. So the elderly and Indigenous peoples in particular were amongst the group of first people to be vaccinated. Now we are waiting for NACI's additional recommendations about who is next in line. But those are just recommendations that come from this federal committee. The provinces and territories are responsible for making decisions about how the inoculations are going to proceed in those jurisdictions. And so we will have to wait and see what their decisions are. We have seen across this country that the elderly in long-term care homes have now had access to a vaccine in many provinces. I just spoke with the frontline healthcare workers in Windsor and Essex area. They've administered 18,000 vaccines and have covered their long-term care homes with at least one inoculation. And we're seeing that across the country. We need to get more vaccines into the country so that more and more vulnerable Canadians have access. But this will roll out to other sectors of our population upon the recommendations of the NACI and then what the provinces and territories decide.
Another question here, we're getting so many vaccines. So, if you were to buy, let's say, planes, let's say an airline went and bought planes, they made an order for 50 Boeing planes, you get the first planes, and then as Boeing makes changes, the next 10 planes have the new improved version. So as we are getting the changes, the new variants, is the vaccines that we're getting going to be improved, or are we getting version 1, 390 of version 1?
So in our vaccine procurements, we followed the advice of the vaccine task force, the scientists,
Okay.
and the scientists advised us on which vaccines were going to be most effective. And they were right. The mRNA vaccine, for example, is incredibly effective. In addition to the advice they provided on vaccines, they will also provide us with advice relating to variants. And what I am discussing with the vaccine suppliers every day is we want to make sure that Canadians have access to the latest technology relating to vaccines as they need to address variants once it comes online. But at the current time, the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine have been proven to be effective against some of the variants that are coming forward. And so again, that underscores the importance of the vaccine diversification effort in procurement that we made in the beginning.
Thank you, Ms. Anand. Also, these vaccines that come in, is this, I mean, there's a lot of school of thought that this may not be a one-time thing. You might have to get top up. It could become like the flu vaccine. It could be something that we will have to do on an ongoing basis. So given that kind of a scenario, maybe the 390 million is looking even better, that this is something that we could use on an ongoing basis, which is also has a question here. Is there an expiry date on these vaccines? I mean, I'm sorry you're getting a lot of very detailed questions, but it is I think as an organization, as a community, we're quite detail oriented, and I think we're wanting to know all the answers. So so we're hoping, what if we just kept this on the shelf, and could we do this top up at a later date? So Minister Anand, anything on those questions, on that aspect?
Remember, we have 7 vaccine manufacturers, and all of these vaccines are different. So for example, when the Pfizer doses are unfrozen, you have 5 days to use those vaccines, and every vaccine has a different shelf life, if you will. So that's why it's really important to make sure we have an effective rollout plan with the provinces and territories, because when these vaccines come into the country, we will want them to be utilized as soon as possible. And now your question is, of course, will we see future inoculations that are needed in additional years? And the science is still outstanding on that point. It may indeed be the case that we would need inoculations every year, but that's not a procurement decision as much as it is the decision of the health experts around the table, the doctors, and Health Canada. Those are the scientists whose advice we've been following for this entire pandemic, and I will act on the basis of their advice. If we are told that inoculations are needed on a yearly basis, we will act accordingly. That's what we did with PPE. We put in place long-term contracts to prepare for any eventuality. 2.7 billion items of PPE procured as a result of the need for PPE over the long term in the second wave, in a possible third wave, as well as building up domestic capacity. So we've got now contracts with a multitude of Canadian companies for the Canadian production of PPE, and that will stand Canada in very good stead in future waves of the pandemic if they occur.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of questions around the PPE. I think that was your first,
hurdle.
Call it, your big job that you, yes. So you kind of learned the tricks of the trade with procuring PPE, and now the stockpiles that we were supposed to have, is that the question is more about stockpiles. Are we okay on the stockpiles? Do we need to go back and procure more? Would you need? I mean, as Canadians, is that should we be wary? Are we okay with the stockpiles?
Okay, thank you. So as I said, we've procured over 2.7 billion items. Just pause for a moment and think. 2.7 billion items, and over 1 billion of those items have been delivered to date. And I want to give you some numbers of what we have received. 59 million face shields, 738 million pairs of gloves, 129 million gowns, 20 million liters of hand sanitizer, 101 million N95s, 336 surgical masks, 22,000 ventilators. That's 336 million surgical masks and 22,000 ventilators. So that gives you a sense of what our planning was like. We weren't just planning for a month or 2 months. We were planning for years so that we would have the supplies necessary in Canada for any eventuality, to give to public healthcare workers, to give to frontline healthcare workers. And that's exactly what we've been doing to support the provinces and territories, and we will continue to do. So as these supplies of PPE dwindle, if they do, we will procure more, but we have now sufficient supplies to provide those supplies to Canadians. And that's not to mention the rapid tests and the standard testing supplies that we have also procured. That's not to mention the supplies that we have procured for effective vaccinations. So you may have heard that the Pfizer vaccine just moved from a 5 to 6 dose regime in each vial. Well, in order for you to extract the maximum number of doses per vial, you need a special type of syringe called a low dose or no dose volume syringe. And what we did in this intense global environment where every country is looking for these same syringes, because they're all trying to administer the Pfizer vaccine, is we procured 64 million syringes, 2 million of which have already been delivered and are going out to the provinces. So let's just say that the Canadian government is supporting Canada's entire vaccine effort, not just by purchasing vaccines, but also by purchasing the supplies needed to administer vaccines, like syringes, like gauze, like swabs, like alcohol swabs as well. And we will continue to be there for the provinces and territories in order to ensure that the vaccine effort is successful.
Thank you, Minister Anand. We have another question. We've bought so much vaccines, so many, so much of PPE. Did we get? I mean, obviously, we're a lot of business people on this call. So the question is, did we get a good rate on what we bought? Now, we bought volumes as well. How does our buying costs compare to what everybody else in the world bought, right? I mean, if somebody bought Moderna and AstraZeneca in India, how much are they paying per vaccine? How much are we paying? Is that comparative? And given that we are one of the biggest buyers, we're assuming we got a good price as well.
Okay, well, thank you for the question. And you'll have to remember that we were very aggressive at the bargaining table. We were first out of the gate. We really made sure that we were well placed with Moderna, with Pfizer. If you talk to the executives of those companies, they will tell you we were one of the first companies to sign with Moderna. We were the fourth company to sign with Pfizer. We were the first country to sign with AstraZeneca that did not have domestic biomanufacturing capability. So we were really aggressive right out of the gate, and we are very well placed with these companies. We will say that, and it's important to note that in terms of price, we paid fair value. We paid the price that we needed to pay to get these vaccines, but we paid fair value. That means that our prices were comparable to other countries on the basis of information that we could discern from the manufacturers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question here. Now we've been hearing in the news about, you did mention as well, we've had hiccups on the road where some of these, they had production issues, and we started off right. We started off, out of the gate quite well, and then things kind of slowed down a little bit. So is there legal recourse that Canada had to some of these things? I mean, if you're a supplier to Amazon, if you're a supplier to Walmart, and you do not ship on time, you get hit by penalties. So, I think we're kind of saying, is there, these guys, since they didn't give it on time, was there anything, did Canada at least put on penalties for them? Ms. Anand, you're on mute again.
I want to be clear that it's really important to remember that the bumps that we have experienced over the last couple of weeks are largely behind us.
Mm-hmm.
And we are on solid footing with our vaccine manufacturers that they will be meeting their contractual obligations for Q1, Q2, and Q3. There has not been a breach of contract at all in terms of our relationship with these suppliers. Furthermore, it would be very unwise, in my opinion, to be seeking recourse against a supplier where there is no breach of contract and where we actually need vaccines in this country. We don't want to undermine our relationships with the vaccine manufacturers that are supplying us with vaccines. If we were to do so, we would jeopardize our vaccine supply chain. And to me, that would risk the health and safety of Canadians. So I believe, and our government believes, that this relationship is stable and should continue to be stable. And we are pressing the vaccine suppliers to ensure that their deliveries come into this country. And that's exactly what's going to happen. They will meet their contractual obligations for Q1. That is what they have assured us will happen. And Q2 and Q3. The minor bumps in the road that we have experienced over the last few weeks hit all countries, and we will make sure that their contractual obligations are met prior to the end of Q1.
And Mr. Anand, there's few people joining a little late, and they've asked the same question: when do I get vaccinated? I am going to take that over from you. And so Q1 6 million, Q2 20, and Q3 was 70, right? 70. Okay, so which means by Q3, it is guaranteed 100% that you will be vaccinated. So there is no there is no doubt that you will be not vaccinated by Q3. I hope that answers the question. There's a question here again, because it's Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce.
Can I just
Sure, go ahead.
Interrupt for 1 second?
Sure.
I think we have to remember that my department is procuring the vaccines. So
Yes.
we bring them into Canada. We ensure that they are here. The provinces and territories are responsible for distributing the vaccines, for making sure that they are available to individual Canadians within each province. So I personally don't comment on individuals' timelines for access to vaccines. Those are questions that should be directed to the province.
Yeah, but you
But
would
having
have.
said that,
Yes,
you're right.
I got that. I got it. Yes.
All 70 plus million vaccines, 70 million plus vaccines will be in this country prior to the end of September. Therefore, any Canadian who wishes to have access to a vaccine prior to the end of September should have access.
Yes, thank you, Minister Anand. And I think, so you will make it available. Obviously, you've said the numbers are going to be there. Yes. So I think I know that you're running out of time. We probably have maybe one more question that we can take. That question is, with the 390, do you have any idea about the number that is the thing that we're doing with India? Is that to get vaccines quicker? Is that to add to the number? Is that a stopgap thing right now to add to the 6 million in Q1? Is it to add to the Q2? Would you know that that number?
I will just say at this time that we are continuing to ensure that we have access to vaccines for Canadians as rapidly as possible. And we have a diversified procurement approach, and we will continue to ensure that as soon as vaccines are available, they will come into Canada based on those relationships.
Yeah, fantastic. Minister Anand, I know you've got to get on to something else, and you've got a few more minutes, I guess. With that, I will like to thank everybody for their time, and Minister Anand, if you had any closing comments for all of us, if we would ask you to make that right now, and we really appreciate you making the time for the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce. We think trade and commerce, it could be vaccines, it could be a business between India and Canada. It is something that we think can really help build stronger bridges between the two countries. There's such a strong, people-to-people connection. I think we can build on that strength. And we'd like to hear some closing notes, and after which my colleague Surinder Sharma will give us closing remarks.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Dhanyavad. It's amazing to be here with you, even virtually, because I will say that my commitment to India and to India-Canada relations is extremely important and at the forefront of my thinking. So I will really thank you so much for inviting me here to speak with you and your members at ICCC. Of course, as you mentioned, my mother, Punjabi, my father, Tamil, and when they met, it was like two different worlds coming together. And as a result, I think I have been able to get the best of both worlds, the North and the South. And I will say that the relatives that I have in India and the many traditions and cultural aspects of my life stem from our Indian heritage. And that is something that I celebrate every day. You can see in my office, and you can see from me and the way I interact with you that this is an extremely important relationship. And I look forward to coming back to you and speaking more about this important aspect of our cultural, our economic, our historic relationship between Canada and India.
We'll love to have you back. And on that note, Minister Anand, I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Surinder Sharma.
Thank you, Vijay. I think it was indeed a very productive and useful session in which all the audience and members of the Indo-Canada Chamber of Commerce, we got a lot of insights how Canada is moving forward. And today, vaccine procurement and rollout, I think, is the biggest service to mankind. Like we say, service to man is the highest prayer to God. So, and in this period, I think this is one of the highest service we can do to save the lives and keep the activity and commerce also moving forward. If we are in good health, then everything will be in good health. So the nation will be in good health. So first of all, I think we are all very proud that the role to do this activity was given to an Indo-Canadian, and she has done an excellent job. And we all must give her a big round of applause. I think we should really be proud of that we have an Indian and a Hindu background, first federal minister in Canada. And as you all know, and she left a very senior position in the University of Toronto to take up this position and be active in politics. But we would like that, I know she's on a leave during this period from the University of Toronto, but we would like her to be continuously serving the Indo-Canadian community. And also, likewise, I would request all our members and our Indian community to back her up. She's going to be again a candidate from Oakville, so we should ensure she succeeds and keeps the Indo-Canadian image high in the politics and in the government in the coming years. So let's wish her the best. And with that, I think she is really high, also set up a very high standards of governance for which we are really proud. Thank you again, Anita ji, for coming and addressing us. So I think I'll go, Vijay, to do the thanks to our sponsors. And first of all, our technology partner, the sponsor, Tangentia. And you heard Vijay. Vijay is the president of Tangentia, and they are also the major sponsor for today's event. Next slide. I'll also like to thank Turkish Airlines, Voice Weekly, PTC Punjabi, and also 2 Indian origin banks, State Bank of India and ICICI Bank, for coming forward to sponsor our series of webinars. And Raymond James, the financial experts who help, particularly Rakesh Vijay has been very active in our chamber and in our community, and Seneca College and GT20, and finally TELUS, who are also our business partners sponsoring this event. And thank you all for coming today. And I think we should end and pray that everybody be healthy and we come over this crisis, and COVID period should be over very soon. May the whole universe and life be happy and safe for everybody. And I'll end with a small shloka, Loka Smasta Sukhino Bhavantu, which means may the whole universe be happy and safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shamaji. Thank you, Anita ji. And we really look forward. You have all our support and backing, and we're very proud of what you're doing. And you know, you have all of us behind you. Thank you.
Dhanyavad. Namaskar.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.